I am Ronald, the Rules Lawyer, and I'm going to be doing an exclusive preview of part of the new Treasure Vault book that will be released by Paizo for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I was given a courtesy advance copy for purposes of review. You may want to, after you see this video, look at my companion video where I felt it was important to address talismans and other consumable items, which are often dismissed by Pathfinder 2e players. They actually can be powerful for the right situations when you grok them. Also, I am aware that there is a demand right now for videos helping people migrate from D&D 5th edition to Pathfinder 2nd edition. I do plan a 3-part series over the next week or two, so like and subscribe and ring the bell if you want to get notified. Part 1 will be the design goals of Pathfinder 2nd edition. Part 2 will be a detailed analysis of 2 combats looked at side by side from D&D 5e and Pathfinder 2nd edition. And Part 3 will be me reacting to 2 notorious videos that have been steering people away from Pathfinder 2e for the past 2 to 3 years. I'll be looking at the arguments that they make critically. The first thing I need to say is that this book, I only have the PDF, but it is thick. Okay, there are books that are bigger than 226 pages, but this is really dense and jam-packed with content. Just to show a typical page in the chapter I have been authorized, as you can see, it's just wall-to-wall items, wall-to-wall, crunch, 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 crunch. And at 226 pages, to put that into context, the core rulebook has about 75 pages, and that's my somewhat beat-up copy of magic items. And then you couple that with the other books that came out after. Advanced Player's Guide has about 20 pages of items. Secrets of Magic has 40 pages more. Guns and Gears, it being a steampunk technology equipment book, has 80 more pages. And Dark Archive and Book of the Dead don't have very much at all. When you add all that up, you realize that the number of items is kind of doubling with this single book. And you add on top of that the fact that these items are also assigned levels and prices, and there's a system for assigning treasure for game masters. It's a treasure trove of content, and on the Archives of Nethys, once this book goes live, you're going to be able to find all of them in easily sortable, filterable charts that are all hyperlinked. This book also does something a lot of recent Pathfinder books does, which I really enjoy. It is set in first person. In this case, we're actually literally being given a guided tour of this ancient dragon who is fabulously wealthy, of all of the magic items and artifacts they contain in their vault. And we're being given this tour by their assistant, who is a kobold, who has, let's say, a unique personality. So I'll be giving a guided tour of this guided tour and look at the chapter that I was allowed to preview before the street date, which is Momentary Magic. This is referring to all of the consumable items, essentially, that are magical, that are presented in this book. Alchemical items are not magical in this system, so they have their own chapter. They are organized into 8 categories, and I'm not going to do them in this order, which is alphabetical. I'm going to start with the categories that are presented to players first in the core rulebook, and then branch out from there. Also, when I go through each category, I'm going to highlight at least one thing that I found to be potentially very useful, either because it is very useful or it has a hidden use that I thought would be worth mentioning. And then I will highlight at least one that stood out to me as being particularly creative and quirky or fun. When pointing out items that are useful, I'll be employing the principles I say in my companion video on how to think about consumable items. And I might give some honorable mentions for some categories too. The first category I'll cover will be potions. Potions can be used by any character, and they do involve actions to pull out and drink. There are 17 of them, at least, and I say at least because some of them, as you can see, like this, come in different levels with different levels of potency. So here, the Fairy Dragon Liqueur stood out to me. It is uncommon, so there needs to be some working with a GM to get actual access to it. But it lets you breathe out a euphoric gas, a 15-foot cone of it. For an entire hour, you can do this every 1 to 4 rounds. Even if they succeed on their saving throw, the creatures are stupefied 1 for a round, and if they fail their saving throw, they are also slowed 1. They take away 1 of your actions every round for 1 to 4 rounds. And if they critically fail, they are stupefied 2. This is very devastating against any creature that uses spells because the stupefied condition imposes a numeric penalty on their spell DCs, but more importantly, forces them to do a flat check to successfully cast a spell at all, or else they waste their spell. So a 25% chance that their spell will be disrupted and lost. One that stood out to me as flavorful was Caden's Brew. Caden Kalian is the regular human who ascended to godhood in Golarion, getting drunk and passing the test of the Starstone. He is the god of freedom, courage, and not wasting alcohol. And with this item, you can, for 1 hour, breathe out a 15-foot cone of intoxicating vapor with a burp, of course. And again, those who succeed are Stupefied 1 as well as Clumsy 1, a penalty on their dexterity-based statistics, including their armor class. And if they fail, they're stupefied longer. And if they critically fail, they become sickened. Those who know Pathfinder know you have to actually retch with an action to try to shake off the effect. The idea of defeating your enemies with burps I thought was very funny. Some honorable mentions are this rare cloning potion, which lets you actually split into two and have a double who has the minion trait, who you can spend 1 action to give 2 actions to, which seems to be one of the few ways in this system that a spellcaster can cast two action spells per round. You can tell your clone to cast Fireball while you cast Fireball. Then there's the hovering potion, which is funny. You are a few inches above the ground and you find it very hard to walk quickly. And you can also use an action to levitate up and down. The immovable potion is interesting. You make it virtually impossible for a creature to be pushed or tripped. So you can put them in a bottleneck place and they can literally tank, but they cannot move from that place for 1 minute. The Mind Swap potion, another rare one, lets you actually switch bodies with somebody else. The Rebirth potion lets you literally change your ancestry overnight. And the Tentacle potion lets you have a third appendage that you can do increasingly useful things with the higher level the potion you take. We then move on to oils, which are also from the core rulebook, and like potions, any character can use them, but they are applied to something. So for weapons, they often apply something that's similar to what a property rune, like a flaming rune, would give to a weapon. But it does not count against the limitation on the number of property runes that you can put on that weapon. There are 12 new types of oils that are introduced here, each of them having different versions. So Bane oil, again, it's an uncommon one, struck me as particularly useful because it gives your weapon the Bane weapon property rune. The Bane rune makes a weapon do 1d6 additional damage to one of 14 different types of creatures. A party that's sufficiently high level could theoretically have one of every kind of Bane oil, and if they scout ahead and know what enemies they're facing in the next battle, be ready for them using this oil. Here's the flavorful one I chose, Oil of Skating. You apply it to your feet, and it lets you skate quickly along flat surfaces. You get a +10 status bonus to your speed, which, if you're going downhill, is doubled. Also, you treat any uphill movement as difficult terrain, and you're more likely to fall if you have to balance. Next are the talismans. These are the things that you can attach to your equipment that don't require any hands to use, that are activated by you if you so choose when a trigger happens. There are 20 new talismans introduced here, and some of them have different levels of power. So here's one I featured in my other video, the Copper Penny. If you are knocked prone by an enemy, you can immediately stand as a free action immediately. Remember, free actions don't have to be done during your turn. But you do have to be an expert in acrobatics, but that can save you the necessity of spending an action to stand, which can be a lifesaver. Similar to that is Emergency Eye. If ever you become blinded by some effect, and you have expert in perception, which every class gets eventually, you can see as if you had vision until the end of your next turn. It's literally an eye that is attached to your armor. At higher levels, this is something to have. Being blinded by some effect happens quite often and can be pretty debilitating. Here's another useful one, Mortalis Coin. Whenever you would be knocked out by a critical hit or by critically failing on a saving throw and would normally go to dying 2, this one makes it only a dying 1. This can actually prevent death sometimes. And for 10 minutes, you die at dying 5 instead of dying 4. So it kind of doubles the effect, kind of. You do have to be an expert in fortitude saves, but this is an excellent thing to invest in as life insurance. For flavor, I chose False Death Vial. This basically functions like the Drop Dead spell. When something would reduce you to 0 hit points and you wouldn't die, you appear to drop dead in place, even with the illusion of a fatal wound. However, you yourself turn invisible and can pretty much walk away. Here is the Drop Dead spell, which, like the item, has the uncommon trait. But unlike that spell, this item is limited to working on you. And there's a little double language here. I believe only the greater version actually teleports you from that spot to a place that you can see. Oh, Megan. Ow. An honorable mention goes to this trio of Dragonclaw items, the Dragonclaw Scutcheon, Cameo, and Trophy. Each of them is keyed to a type of dragon, an energy type. And one of them, when triggered, gives you and your items immunity to that energy type. Another one, when triggered, makes you do that energy type with your weapon and damage. And the other one gives you wings. And if you happen to wear all 3 at once, and any of the 3 is triggered, then you can actually use the Dragon Breath Focus spell. Next, we cover Magical Ammunition, which are excellent for martial characters to consider because a lot of them deliver special effects, almost like spells, or debuffs or other effects, and they are automatically delivered when you succeed on your attack roll. The initial effect probably does not have a saving throw. There are 15 new types of magical ammunition introduced, not including the different levels that some of them have. So the useful ones I found were these first ones. Black Tendril Shot, when it hits, they do get to do a fortitude save, but even if they succeed, they are slowed 1, which takes away an action. If they fail, they are slowed 2. There is no incapacitation trait here, so this is a quite strong debuff. Next is the Bola Shot, which does not call for a saving throw. It has a chance of tripping the enemy. If you hit the enemy's AC, you also compare that attack roll to their reflex DC. If you succeed, they fall prone, which we know is a very strong debuff, and critically succeed, they are further stunned 1. They lose an action. Notice there is no DC attached here. This can be useful at level 20. For flavor, I chose the Imp Shot, which is hilarious. It's a black and red ammunition with an egg-shaped capsule that has an imp inside it. When you hit the enemy, a tiny imp flies out, and if you miss it, the imp just appears and gives it a rude gesture to you and flies away. But if you actually do hit the enemy's AC, it's going to harry the target for up to 1 minute, slapping, nipping, hurling insults, and moving with the target as it moves. The creature is flat-footed and has a -2 circumstance penalty to attack rolls and skill checks. These are very strong debuffs. Putting circumstance penalties on enemy checks are few and far between. But there's a 50-50 chance every round that the imp stops doing this, gives a rude gesture to the target, and vanishes. Honorable mention goes to Dimension Shot. If you hit a creature, and remember, if you have a longbow, you can shoot quite far, you teleport immediately next to that creature. You can also aim at a square and just appear in that square. If you have any martial character who has trouble getting to hard-to-reach foes, this is a godsend for the right fight. We now move on to catalysts, which can be thought of as meta magic in that they enhance the effects of spells, but each catalyst is keyed to a specific spell. We first saw these in the Secrets of Magic book. You basically have to hold them in hand, and sometimes it requires an extra action be added to your casting of the spell. There are 8 general types of catalysts that are included. Some of them have different versions. Fearcracker enhances mirror image. When an enemy would eliminate one of your mirror images, it dies in a disturbing fashion, making that attacker frightened 1. There was no saving throw involved. The fact that there's no save makes this quite useful, especially for those boss creatures that have those really high stats that you need to try to lower. For flavor, I thought this was interesting, Euphoric Loop, because of the situations it might be used in. When you charm a creature, you can give them a particularly blissful experience so that when the charm's effect ends, they are stunned. Something negative happens to them. So if you are charming a guard to let you into a stronghold that you plan to turn against later, this can be useful in that situation. So you can prevent them from calling the alarm as you knock them out. Fulus were introduced in Secrets of Magic. They're basically paper charms that can be affixed to objects or creatures, even enemy creatures, that have a wide variety of effects. One good thing about them is that it only takes a single action to affix them to something. There are 16 of them here, not including the different levels some of these items have. For usefulness, I highlight the Paracha Fulu, another uncommon item, that you can wear up to 9 at once, and whenever you would be damaged by persistent damage, you don't take any damage, and the Fulu crumbles to dust. Persistent damage while you're unconscious is one of the common ways to die in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. This also requires no action on your part, so it can even happen while you're unconscious. This seems like a very valuable failsafe to have. For flavor, I chose Stumbling Fulu. Let's say you affix it to somebody, either surreptitiously before combat breaks out, or in the middle of combat. Whenever they try to walk, there's a chance that their clothing is going to get somehow tangled up, and they get the clumsy condition, and they have to spend an action to get rid of it. But this was a nice low-level example of something that could be done to plan for an encounter. It might be a fun way to set up a boss fight at low levels against a creature that does not seem very agile. Next are Missives, which literally are stationary, magical stationary. They don't need to have any writing on them. The paper itself is the source of magic. This lets any character to spend 10 minutes to specify what exactly the missive does, and it takes effect when someone reads it or looks at it. There are 7 types of missives that are introduced here. For usefulness, this one obviously is useful, the Explosive Missive. I also highlighted it because, okay, it does energy damage when someone looks at it, but I thought it was interesting that what you write has an effect on the kind of damage. So if what you write is caustic, it's acid damage, aloof, cold, energetic, electric, angry, fire, and overly emphatic is sonic. And for flavor, I chose Red-Handed Missive. This is a way to catch somebody red-handed. It coats anything touching the missive when it's activated with a red dye that cannot be washed out for 1 week. One could see the utility of that. And a lot of these consumables have a wide variety of utility. Like here on this page, you can see one to send messages, for example. The last catch-all category is Wondrous Consumables, so everything that doesn't fit in every other category. Included in here are the spellguns. And by the way, all of these categories had a lot of great artwork illustrating many of the items introduced. And yes, spellguns, they're basically a one-time use item that are kind of similar to magical ammunition. You get to deliver an effect through an attack. On that, this one stood out to me, the Bewildering Spellgun. Basically, if you can hit an enemy with this, they are confused. There is no saving throw. They get a free will save at the end of their next turn. But they don't get even that if you critically succeed. And confusion can get them to attack their allies. Very strong. This one also looked very useful. Familiar Morsel. It's a treat that you can give to your familiar, and it gives them one of the familiar abilities for 1 hour. There's a huge list of potential familiar abilities. Flying, burrowing, that basically makes your familiar a walking toolkit if you can invest in a variety of these morsels. And when you're high enough level, you can afford plenty of these. Another useful one is Potion Patch. Remember the problem of having to pull out and drink a potion with 2 actions? This essentially solves that problem by having a potion patch affixed to your skin. Note that it affects only potions and not elixirs and other consumables. And for flavor, we have to talk about the Bargainer's Instrument. This is literally the song Devil Went Down to Georgia as a magic item. It's an instrument that lets you call a willing extraplanar talent to compete with you in a duel, and it even has rules for that duel. And the winner has to do some task for the loser within the next week. So that was my exclusive sneak preview of the magical consumables. I hope that applying the principles from the last video can kind of give you an idea of how to get excited for and using consumables more in your campaigns. And also, I encourage people to leave comments if I got anything wrong, and also some of the other things that were on the screen. Maybe some of you have thought of ideas and uses that I didn't. If you enjoyed this, you may like my videos on alchemy that I did. I'm going to link them at the end of the video. And also like and subscribe. I'm going to put out my 3-part series helping people migrate from D&D 5th edition to Pathfinder 2nd edition. And also a lot of the things on my channel already will help you out if that describes you. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. Join my Discord community if you're interested in finding help in learning Pathfinder 2nd edition. There are also people who are running the beginner box there for newcomers. And also support my Patreon. That's it. I will see you next time.